now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for November 4th. Well, here we are with one system active at the moment, and that is Tropical Storm Wanda, which has had quite the erratic life when it comes to what it's done in the past and what it's expected to do in the future. This 307th day of the year, 85 storms is the current total, with 92 being the average for the year, so we are getting close to that total there. It's day 156 of Atlantic hurricane season, and the only thing of note here is Tropical Storm Wanda, which has been moving northwards today and looking pretty well organized. It is expected to make a U-turn yet again before making a third U-turn while it turns extratropical. In the eastern Pacific, you can see what's going on here. We have a very far eastern invest that is 93E. Could become one of the easternmost forming TCs on record in that basin, and there's also another area of interest with a 50% chance of formation there, so some pretty interesting late season activity going on there. In the western Pacific, there are no systems active and none expected in the next 5 days, a complete contrast to what the eastern Pacific season is producing at the moment. Normally you do see that late season blow, but we haven't really seen it here in the western Pacific yet. In the North Indian Ocean, there is nothing going on. What used to be 90S, of course, or not 93S, I should say, is pretty much entirely gone. So there has been nothing the last few days, at least in any portion of the Indian Ocean. So with that, that brings us over to the track forecast for Wanda, winds of 50 miles an hour and a pressure of 992 millibars from the 5 p.m. Eastern National Hurricane Center Advisory, and it is expected to make another U-turn soon before making another one and then rapidly moving off towards the northeast as an extratropical system. Could bring impacts to the United Kingdom. We can see what goes on with that, but as of right now, it is too early to tell. So Ireland and the United Kingdom, that might be something you guys get to watch, and you can see it on the satellite imagery. It is a pretty small storm, but looking pretty good for an early November storm at that latitude. So definitely cheers to Wanda for that. Definitely great that it's not the same scene as last year, of course. In the eastern Pacific, you can't exactly see that other invest. You will have to go back to the Atlantic satellite imagery to see it. We can see that other area of interest that we're currently tracking. Just a mess of showers and thunderstorms at the moment, but nothing that's going to be developing into a tropical cyclone for the next 2 or 3 days. 4 or 5 days, that will look more likely. In the western Pacific, it's devoid of a lot of activity, really. There's a little disturbance to the east of the Philippines and one about 1,500 miles east of there, but other than that, nothing that's actually going to be getting itself organized in the slightest here. Even ensembles aren't picking up anything in the next 5 days, so it's going to be looking pretty quiet as we head into the second half of the week here. In the North Indian Ocean, it's all quiet here as well, with the only thing to note being a few clouds that are going on in the Bay of Bengal and stretching into the Arabian Sea, but other than that, nothing really to note there. And there you go, a little zoomed in view of Wanda there. Has an eye-like feature, as you can tell here, with convection continuously wrapping around the center there. So it is doing pretty good at keeping its organization going. It's just that satellite-derived wind estimates haven't really found anything up past 50 miles an hour. Here are the sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific. They look like this. It's around 27 to 28 and cooling still as you head into the eastern Pacific region. There are some areas that are 29, especially where 93E is at the moment. The Gulf of Mexico continues to cool. Same thing with the main development region. Caribbean still looking around 27 to 28. And as of right now, we are looking at some 22 degrees Celsius temperatures where Wanda currently is. So it's doing pretty good, being influenced by other environmental factors that are helping it keep its intensity. In the North Indian Ocean, you can see what's going on here, around 28 to 29 in the Bay of Bengal. It's around 27 to 28 as you head west into the Arabian Sea. In the Western Pacific, you can see what's going on here, around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius throughout much of the basin. There's 30 degrees Celsius popping up as you head near the equator. And once you get into the southern hemisphere, it's around 27 to 28. It's getting to that point where we start to see those temperatures warm enough to see some tropical cyclone development, as we are getting to that point where the southern hemisphere season starts to wind itself back up. In terms of the anomalies, we're still watching that La Nina continue to progress in its weak stages there. Atlantic is still looking above average in terms of the temperatures, same with the Western Pacific and the North Indian Ocean. And of course, the Central Pacific is still looking pitifully below average in much of its region there. On this day in 2001, not only did we have another Category 4 that had just made landfall in 2020, but we also had Hurricane Michelle, which was now a Category 4 hurricane and will later on go on to impact Cuba at that intensity. There was also Subtropical Storm Noel, which would later on become a hurricane as well. Needless to say, Michelle would eventually get retired from the naming list along with Allison and Iris. Of course, you can find more of our On This Day products powered by Cyclone History on the bottom bar below. Well, that brings us over to the next names in the Atlantic. The next two names here are Adria, followed by Braylon, now on the auxiliary list, of course. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for Sandra and Terry. And in the Central Pacific, the only way you're going to be finding Hone anytime soon is in one of our What Might Have Beens. In the Western Pacific, the next two names here are Nieto, followed by Ray. And in the North Indian Ocean, the next two names here are Jawad, followed by Asani. Moving on over into the Southern Hemisphere, the next two names in the Southwestern Indian Ocean are Anna, followed by Betsy Ray. The Australian region, we're looking out for Patty. And in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Cuddy. We'll be back for another Tropical Weather Bulletin tomorrow night.